Afshin Rattansi is a very close friend of mine and a valued colleague. He is an authority on international politics, as any of you who've watched this show Going Underground already know, and if you haven't yet watched it, catch up soon. Afshin Rattansi joins us now. Afshin, the number of subject areas that we could cover is so great it would take the whole show and more. But let's start with the situation in Gaza, if we may. I don't know about you, but for me, the situation has exponentially stepped up a level. The attrition of all these people over all this time, coming up for 2 years now, is one thing. But when people start falling down in the street dead from hunger, it's hard to see how this can be sustained, explained. It's hard to see how this can be allowed to continue. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, on Monday's Going Underground, we actually talked to a former Israeli intelligence agent, and he kind of smiles with the word genocide. I mean, I hope Audrey White, the Merseyside Pensioners Association person you referred to earlier in that amazing monologue, so befitting of today, which is the 100th birthday of Frantz Fanon, the great Martinique political philosopher who wrote Wretched of the Earth. It's not only the extermination of these 2 million people, it is the way anyone trying to show solidarity with those people are treated. I'm wearing a Bob Dylan T-shirt here. You can see it seems that, especially speaking to you in England right now, there's something we can't even talk about right now because we'd face 14 years in prison for talking about a non-violent protest group. So it's incredibly difficult in these NATO countries that are arming Israel. I know that every day Keir Starmer sends those flights to aid the genocide. But ironically, Mike Huckabee is a bit of a hero today, would you believe? When NATO countries are not destroying churches in Ukraine and persecuting Christians, and of course, one should say there's an 83-year-old Christian who was arrested in Parliament Square for talking about that non-violent protest group, considered a terrorist group. Mike Huckabee, Trump's ambassador to Israel, it appears, has suddenly understood, and he's a great believer in end times, that Israel are persecuting Christians, and he is suggesting that potential reciprocal visa restrictions for Israeli citizens seeking to enter the United States. Because suddenly, even Mike Huckabee realizes how Christians are spat on by these Israeli Zionists. And of course, symbolic of this week of the execution food camps, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation execution centers, was that picture of the only Catholic church in Gaza being destroyed, lethal attack, killing two. Words fail us, but we must continually not be somehow desensitized by the violence that, thanks to Elon Musk, we can see on X and other non-censored platforms that we can see.
Quite so. If we run out of words, the world is doomed. A lot of people rely on us for our words, and so we shan't run out of words. But I've certainly run out of patience for the governments of the West and of the East, and I'm sensitive to where you are as you are to where I am. But the fact that the entire world is being held hostage, to coin a phrase, by a country of 7 million people the world could feed all of these people overnight, although many of them now are beyond saving. They're in what's called the 5th stage of malnutrition. And even if food did become available, it would not save their lives. But the world could open that gate and flood the place with food and medicine and water. They just won't. Why?
These are genocidal countries in any case, one could say. Look at the way 1 million Ukrainians have been sacrificed in the proxy war on Russia. They don't care. You mentioned earlier that Colonel Tulsi Gabbard is now finally, gosh, they take a long time, the Trump administration. Well, after 6 months. Obama's been running around for 6 months. When is Obama going to be arrested, the butcher of Libya, for trying to overthrow the American government? But, you know, this is the kind of genocidal scale they are. It's ironic, isn't it? Obama is going to get finally go behind bars, perhaps, for trying to overthrow the democracy in the United States, when, of course, in any normal world, he would be destroyed for the crime of Libya. But if they could do that to Libya, if they could do it to Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, the numbers, it just goes on, doesn't it? Of course, they can kill 2 million Palestinians. And of course, this is the worst. This is the Holocaust now.
It truly is. The deputy spokesman of the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs just a couple of hours ago attacked me, calling me the Goebbels of this age. But of course, the Goebbels is them. What they're doing, the only difference between it and the Holocaust of the 1940s is that this one is on our phones. We can watch it. And another key difference is that we could end it like that if we decided to, whereas we had to fight our way, and particularly...
It's not that we can end it. It's they are participating in it, and the only reason Netanyahu can do this is because of the co-belligerents of the European Union, Britain, and the United States, isn't it? So I think the mindset has to change. That's why it's kind of pertinent that it's Frantz Fanon's 100th birthday. That's what they want to happen. And the media over there, I mean, you know, I have to say, a lot is said about GCC countries not saying what they should. But, you know, MBS, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who clearly, when he speaks, you get a lot of anti-Saudi press in Britain when he says anything independent, has called it out as a genocide. While all the mad commentators and so-called journalists, actual stenographers in NATO countries talk about the idea of an Abraham Accord. There are condemnations by GCC countries of this. Of course, militarily, it is very difficult and sensitive. But the fact is, it is these European powers that are actively engaged. So they, I suppose, are making themselves future targets, because when all this is done, no one will ever forget what Britain's role was in the genocide, or the United States. But as I say, Trump is so quixotic, he may this week say a few things. But of course, he's been giving more aid than in 6 months than Genocide Joe did. Genocide Joe Biden and Holocaust Harris did.
That's a fact, yeah. Absolutely correct. Let me segue, because I don't have you all night, to what I used to call the big enchilada, but all these enchiladas are getting quite large, the NATO war against Russia. Trump has given Russia an ultimatum. How he feels he's in a position to give ultimata to Russia is, of course, itself another and maybe psychological question. But the war isn't going to stop. What might be going to stop, though, is the presidency of Volodymyr Zelensky. Suddenly, on one weekend, all the top people's papers, the Financial Times, the Spectator, and others, have basically called time on Zelensky. How are you reading all this?
Yeah, it's amazing how this totalitarian NATO country, Britain, just on key changes its tune. But Cy Hirsch, friend of mine, great journalist, has already said Zelensky will be the new president, dictator, martial dictator of fascist Ukraine. I should say, because I know we want to talk about the proxy war, but the Epstein affair is related here, because Cy Hirsch was a man who was the guy who interviewed Ari Ben Menashe. And my interview with him on Going Underground is spotted. You can see it on social media. It was 5 years ago I interviewed him. And it was Ari Ben Menashe who was the source for Sy Hirsch and the Samson option, and about Israel's nuclear weapons. And I know you in Parliament spoke up afterwards about that. He also, Ari Ben Menashe, exposed that it was the Israeli embassy in London that was contacted by Robert Maxwell to entrap Mordecai Vanunu, the man we are grateful to for revealing the nuclear weapons of Israel. Israel, of course, completely with Ukraine in this current war. Anyway, Ari Ben Menashe is the guy who said, and he's been right so many times before, Iran-Contra, he leaked to Time magazine. Time magazine suppressed it. It was his revelations that kicked off the Iran-Contra scandal coming out. And it was he who said that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent. So there is a relation there between all of that. As to what Trump was doing as regards to 50 days and the timeline, perhaps he was doing it to just please John Ratcliffe at the CIA and Marco Rubio. It obviously makes no difference. Russia kind of shrugged it off. I noticed Italy and a few other countries said we're not going to be buying the American weapons that Trump wants us to buy to use against Russia. Britain, our country, of course, though, first in there. Britain must be rolling in money for its pensioners, its sick, its elderly, because I think, 100 years he's going to, Starmer has announced all that money for it. More American weaponry.
Yeah.
I think Russia has to make a decision as to whether it now targets the countries that are sourcing, that are the source of the weapons, that are the source for Kiev. And I should just add, there is no freedom of speech in Britain. I know that because Steve Sweeney, a Lebanon correspondent, went to visit his child in London and was detained and asked about his views on the Ukraine war. That's what happens at airports in Britain. You get asked about your views on the subject you just asked me about by police.
Under the Terrorism Act, just like Kit Clarenberg, just like Craig Murray, just like Richard Medhurst. This country is in a very, very steep nosedive. But I take your point. Maybe the 50 days wasn't meant to add up to much. The problem is the 50 days is already counting down. And what is Trump going to do? Is he really going to sanction the world 100% tariffs on anyone who has any trading relationship with Russia? That's a recipe for economic World War III, isn't it?
Well, he keeps talking about how he loves the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. How's he going to put sanctions on the UAE and Saudi Arabia for their trade with Russia? Clearly, it is a nonsense. He's not going to go as far as the ridiculous golf partner, Senator Lindsey Graham, who seemed to threaten Russia the way that Iran was threatened. But certainly after the attacks on Iran, about 100 miles away from that window behind me, no one trusts the United States for any negotiation. And Trump has made countries all around the world realize the necessity to have nuclear weapons against the ideas of Ayatollah Khomeini theologically in Iran. And all week, Russia and China have been sending cargo planes to Tehran. I can't imagine that Putin would trust any American negotiation in Istanbul. So I suppose, and we all hope this will happen, there will be a summit of some kind between Trump and Putin, either before the 50-day are over or after. Of course, on his plate at the moment, though, is the MAGA base clamoring for news about Jeffrey Epstein, about which the whole Gaza genocide may then become an issue, because never in our lifetimes, George, have we witnessed Republicans on the scale, the scale it is, talking about now is the time to end not only the support for Israel. The United States can't feed its own population. So many tens of millions can't eat without federal aid. Stop the aid to Israel. And of course, they've already, it looks like, cut any funding for the proxy war in Russia through Ukraine.
Well, I mean, how do you account for the state capture which the Epstein affair crystallizes? I mean, it's hard to conclude otherwise than that Epstein was collecting all this compromat, and we know that he was because we saw the news coverage of the raid on his Manhattan townhouse. We saw the FBI carrying out all the tapes, all the videotapes and hard drives. He had a camera in every single room. That must account for a substantial part of the state capture of the United States by the Israel lobby, mustn't it?
We don't like conspiracies, do we, George? We like and understand things in the round, structured, often between class conflict. These are the engines of history. But in this case, and we know that if Obama, after all, with the connivance of the entire totalitarian so-called free press in the United States was trying to overthrow the government, and if Robert Maxwell, who stole all the Mirror pensioners' money, was killed by Mossad after being a Mossad agent, it's clear that in NATO countries no free press exists, and that these things can be hidden even when they're on a scale so bizarre that I think Tucker Carlson gasps every time he says it, doesn't it? The fact that Jeffrey Epstein had the largest townhouse in Manhattan and was and no one knew where the money came from. Tomorrow's the death day of Alexander Cockburn, one of my mentors. This is the golden age is in us. Alexander Cockburn, who founded Counterpunch, which sadly went awry over the Syria civil war. I wish he was alive because, we don't really analyze things in these terms. That he really was. I think when I did that interview with the Israeli Mossad agent, Ari Ben Menashe, I didn't fully appreciate it. How is it possible that the United States' foreign policy, the genocide in Gaza, can all be tied up with a man trafficking young girls, rather as the Canadians did for ISIS in Syria, it should be added, trafficking young girls and then blackmailing oligarchs in this way. But we're never going to hear it from Mossad, are we, directly? And do you think Trump wants to say it out loud?